Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
There was an extraordinary moment in today's White House press briefing, one of the true low points of the Trump administration, and one that would again provoke people like John Brennan to consider just how treasonous the people in this White House, in addition to the president, can actually be. Let's listen to this question from Maggie Haberman and the answer.
Russian authorities yesterday named several Americans who they want to question, who they claim were involved in Bill Browder's quote-unquote crimes in their terms, including a former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. Does President Trump support that idea? Is he open to having U.S. officials question Russia?
The president's going to meet with his team, and we'll let you know when we have an announcement on that.
For a second, is that a topic that came up in their conversation? Did President Putin raise this with President Trump?
There was some conversation about it, but there wasn't a commitment made on behalf of the United States, and the president will work with his team, and we'll let you know if there's an announcement on that front.
Former Secretary of State John Kerry tweeted, "The administration needs to make it unequivocally clear that in a million years this wouldn't be under consideration, period, full stop, not something that should require a half second of consultation. Dangerous." And back with us for our discussion, Gene Robinson, Matt Miller, and Frank Figluzzi. He is the former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence. And Gene, this was a moment like no other, like nothing we've ever seen. Will the president consider handing over a former ambassador to Russia for investigation, questioning, and arrest and conviction and imprisonment?
There are not words. I mean, this could never, that response that Sarah Sanders gave, that she didn't have an answer, of course this is completely out of the question, yet this was apparently discussed in that private meeting. And so what else was discussed in that private meeting? In our newspaper, the Washington Post, we have a piece about the Russians saying there were important agreements reached in this private meeting that our government, that our officials know nothing about, to say nothing about you and I. We have no idea what they decided, yet apparently, according to the Russians, they might be trolling us, who knows. They reached important agreements, those two leaders, in secret. And so it's just extraordinary.
Matt Miller, we know that Trump personnel are the least experienced people in the history of the government. Sarah Sanders would not be a press secretary or an assistant press secretary or a deputy assistant in any other White House. So there's always the rank ignorance explanation for everything that they say. And because she doesn't know what she's actually talking about most of the time, she thinks that might be an acceptable answer to this. But then there's the much more extremely dangerous possibility here. And that is that Donald Trump, as Gene says, did actually discuss this with Vladimir Putin and did come to some kind of agreement of, yeah, well, of course, if you want to talk to Ambassador McFaul, we'll deliver him to you.
Yeah, and I think it's very clear she didn't feel she had the runway from her boss to come out and say what the State Department said today, which is this is an absurd idea and that one that the United States would never agree to, because she probably has no idea what her boss did agree to in that meeting, and she probably would be worried that if the president saw her say that, he might be mad at her for coming to the defense of someone like Michael McFaul, who is a former Obama administration appointee and is a critic of his, who goes on television and criticizes the president. It gets back to the question that Eugene was raising about, we don't know what happened in this meeting. What a normal president would say, a president who is sticking up for America, when Vladimir Putin raised something like that, would say, look, that's absurd, it's insulting, we're absolutely not going to make one of our former ambassadors available for questioning, and I reject the false equivalence of you comparing the hacking that you ordered. We now know that President Trump knew that Putin ordered it himself, that you ordered, with one of your conspiracy theories about something that happened. It's an absolute false equivalence, and I reject it. But you saw that he was intrigued by the idea. He brought it up twice in his press conference after the meeting. And there's some part of me that wonders that when Putin brought it up, I'd love to know whether the president didn't say something like, well, he's a former Obama administration appointee. He's someone who criticizes me. I'm not all that disturbed by the idea.
Frank, the answer that we just heard Sarah Sanders give is, and this is something that Donald Trump and Senator Sanders probably don't even understand, is fundamentally un-American.
So let me address this ignorance as a defense issue first. I stopped buying into that ignorance defense a long time ago with this administration, because look what you led off with tonight, Lawrence. This story tonight that the president knew 2 weeks before the inauguration that an adversary was trying to assist him and responsible for hacking removes that possibility of the ignorance defense. So when he's coughing up, he's talking, even considering coughing up American citizens, coughing up a U.S. ambassador, the conclusion you have to draw is that he's aiding and abetting the enemy.
It is Thursday, the 19th of July of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. That's right, folks, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Yes. Well, before we begin, we've had tremendously bad air here in Southern Oregon, Northern California, right along the border, and from a lot of forest fires and grass fires that have occurred here in the last couple of days. And the air quality was just so bad yesterday. It was thick. And it's not good today either. And if you hear a little bit of a catch in my throat and lungs, it's because there's a little bit of catch in my throat and lungs manifested by heavy particulates in the air that happen to be breathing right now. I know I should be wearing a mask, but I'm in the house. It's just from going outside briefly, and yeah, it's bad. So let's go on, and enough of that. I just wanted to make sure if I mute the mic, and it's because I'm coughing. Okay. I think I'll be able to handle it now. Well, that was Lawrence and panel considering that if Trump wants to hand over McFaul, that is. And when we say hand over McFaul, we mean Ambassador McFaul to the Russians, to Vlad. That is aiding and abetting the enemy. There's no getting around it. Wow. Time Magazine has a really good mashup on the cover of Trump as Vlad or Vlad as Trump. You got to see it. It's great. Yeah, I think I heard that's the second time this month that Trump has made the cover of Time Magazine. Interesting. Very interesting. Looks like the White House press corps have had enough. Now to be fair, behind the scenes, they have been discussing the predicament that they are in, and in small, out of sight ways, they have been trying to effect some sort of pushback. But of course, it hasn't been viewed by any of us, the viewing public, until, well, yesterday. And that was when there was some pushback, and Sarah Sanders wanted to, not answer a question by going to another question from another reporter. And that reporter, I believe the guy from The Hill, turned it back over to Hallie Jackson so that she could finish up. I guess Sarah's going to have to figure out a new strategy now because the kids are all right. Let me also be clear. This strategy of dealing with the press and these so-called pressers with Sarah have been staged and perfected by Vlad. It's been written about quite extensively, the way that he changed the press in his little burg. And little burg is right. I mean, his country doesn't even have the GDP of Italy. Now, I know Italy's got some pretty nice cars. They run hot. There's a lot of maintenance. But still, Trump acquiescing to that, I think that actually belies the fear I had way back when he was just dating this Czechoslovakian skier in the height of the Cold War. How does somebody get away with that? Oh, he's rich. I remember thinking about that. He's getting away with it because he's rich. And I also thought at the time, there's no way that our intelligence services is going to allow this guy to move about without really following his movements. Not too many people are happy about it, except for Republicans. Polling out this morning shows that Republicans really love treason, whereas Democrats and independents don't. And yet, Democrats are the enemy. And looks like Russia is just a super PAC helping out. What else do we have on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, states that limit property tax increases hurt low-income families. You know, you almost felt like that was the case, but they have a report that actually proves it. Good. More than half of U.S. school districts are not testing for lead in their drinking water. And you know what's really bad? Those that do, fully a third, have increased levels that are dangerous. Yeah. And Trump's Supreme Court pick is the least popular nominee in the history of Gallup polling. Because he's a Russian asset also, isn't he? After the break, we move to the chef's table where the European Union fines Google a record-breaking $5 billion. And that's on top of, what? The $1 billion that they got sued or fined from before. Crazy. And gene editing damages DNA more than previously thought. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will notice the chat room link. That is monitored, by the way, by our roaring girl, Kelly Lincoln, who, by the way, is going to Netroots Nation in New Orleans. And I'm going to make an entreaty until she goes, and maybe even while she's there. Because we need to feed Kelly, like dinner and lunch and maybe even breakfast. And if you could help out on that, that would be fabulous. There is a link to her funding platform on my show notes and links diary on Daily Kos. So please check that out. I'll attempt to put this entreaty as well on the various social media platforms, so you'll have a link from there. And your generosity is really what keeps Resistance Radio here at Netroots Radio going. The contribute donate buttons that we have are to the leftish of the page our homepage at netrootsradio.com, at the bottom there from the chat room link. But in this time period, if you would just please fund Kelly directly, that way she'll be able to, well, you'll not get starved. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. You can follow Netroots Radio on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And as I mentioned before, the show notes and links diary is posted on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And I'm there as Justice Putnam. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, on Facebook, and as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And, what else? Oh, yes, of course, podcasts of the show can be had by way of iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, etc., etc., etc. Oh, boy. This idea of turning McFaul over to Russia, and this is all about the Broder lawsuit that Broder brought against Putin for killing his lawyer, which the Magnitsky Act is named after, because that guy got tortured and killed in a Putin gulag because Broder, who is a billionaire in his own right, ran an investment firm, found out that he was getting ripped off by Putin, tens of billions of bucks, and his company. And he brought corruption charges against him. He uncovered corruption in the Putin regime, and now they want him dead. And Putin has used Interpol to harass Broder for quite a while. And this is the guy who goes from country to country so that countries will set up what's known as the Magnitsky Act, that, until Russia cleans up their act, maybe some economic sanctions should be exacted. Putin's a mob boss. The law is for little people. You do what Putin says. And Trump wants to be like that, except he'll never be like that. He'll be a subordinate to that. But that's good enough for him. And we are in dire times. And 62 million people, or 60-some million people, voted for this fool. And the Democrats are the enemy. And the Republicans are simply just, and the Russians are simply just a super PAC. Okay. Well, let's get on with our first article here. It comes by way of Think Progress, and Danielle McLean authored this piece. State laws limiting the amount of money cities and towns can raise in property taxes each year have hamstrung municipal budgets and schools, engendered racial inequality, and further burdened low-income people, according to a new report from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. A total of 44 states and the District of Columbia have at least some limit on the amount local communities can raise in property taxes, the primary funding source for important government services such as schools, police, and fire protection. And then I remember back in the day when Prop 13 came through in California. California had the number one school system in the nation at the time. And in just a few short, I think it's like not even 3 years, they went from number 1 to number 42. Yeah, that's how it works. If you were intent on destroying the very fabric of what America is, you would try to starve the beast, wouldn't you? Shrink it to the size where you can drown it in a bathtub. That way it's much easier for a foreign state power who has the GDP of an Italy to be able to take you over. This is all part of a whole. I think this conspiracy has been going on for much longer. I'm curious now about Grover Norquist's funding. How many rubles have been in his pocket and coffers? I'm just curious. It's a little too cute when you put it all together. Trump knew before his inauguration with irrefutable evidence. I mean, we're not talking the aluminum tubes story at the UN with Powell. We're talking about the hair on fire guy coming in and saying, look, they're going to fly planes right into the buildings. He got that. He knew about it. He grudgingly accepted it. And what did he do? He used that evidence as somehow proof that it was all a vast conspiracy of the deep state, which is a goddamn rhetorical construction out of Hungary. And then as perfected and finessed and put into better use by Vlad. Crunden, also from Think Progress, brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Oh, yes. Well, less than half of U.S. school districts are testing their drinking water for lead, according to a new government report, and those that do are seeing alarming results. More than a third found elevated levels of the substance, which can have severe and potentially deadly health consequences. But, you know, it's a constitutional right to poison the populace, isn't it? Maybe even on purpose. How else to explain Flint? Only 43% of school districts around the country tested for lead in 2017, and this is after Flint. Oh, my God. Their efforts included replacing water fountains and other measures like introducing water filtration systems, because the GAO issued a report that 37% of school districts had elevated levels of lead. And so they had to replace water fountains and other measures like introducing water filtration systems. Well, they should have had that to begin with. Oh, boy. So then this article also gives the symptoms of lead poisoning, and you can look that up, as they're very familiar. I mean, lower brain development, any number of other things. I'm a little hesitant about mentioning IQ anymore, because is that really an adequate measure of, well, intellectual capacity? I don't know about that anymore. But the neurotoxin lead can cause headaches, memory loss, fatigue, and nausea, in addition to heart disease and high blood pressure. Yeah, high blood pressure here. But that's okay. We have some pills to counteract all of that stuff now. So don't worry. Let's just put lead, or allow lead to stay in the system. We'll fix it later. So the report is a wake-up call to the Trump administration that it must take immediate action to address lead in drinking water. 6 Democrats wrote, who have introduced a joint statement calling on the Trump administration to act, because everything is run by the Republicans. And since the Democrats are the enemy and the Russians are a super PAC, Russia says, no, we're not really ready for you to get rid of lead in your water. We need to really lower your GDP down, because our GDP is only the size of Italy. We need to, lower your GDP in some way. How can we do that? here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, is an article out of Share Blue Media by Oliver Willis. Trump's reverse Midas touch is struck again. Brett Kavanaugh is now the worst polling Supreme Court nominee in the history of Gallup. Trump's hand-picked choice to tilt the court completely to the right has just 41% of the electorate backing his candidacy, while 37% oppose. That results in a net support of +4. By comparison, Trump's first Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch, was at +13 in the same poll. Kavanaugh's poor performance puts him in line with other nominees offered by Republican presidents who were ultimately rejected. Robert Bork, nominated by Ronald Reagan, had a +6 level support, while W. Bush's disastrous nominee, Harriet Miers, remember that? Harriet Miers was at +8. My. Okay, so he's now +4. Worse than Harriet Miers. Only he's half as bad. Both of Trump's picks also had less than 50% support. Merrick Garland, President Barack Obama's final choice for a Supreme Court position, had a 52% support, which pegs out at +23. But they were actively in the process of destroying America with foreign help. So they held up that nominee. So when their guy got in, their man from Moscow got in, they could ride that wild bear and see where it goes. State Republicans, led by Mitch McConnell, refused to hold hearings or have a vote on Garland's nomination, and now McConnell is pushing for an accelerated nomination process that would put Kavanaugh on the bench. They got to do it before Trump gets impeached. You know. Kavanaugh is central to Republican efforts to roll back progress in the U.S. He has been vetted by the right-wing Federalist Society to undo Roe v. Wade, attack Obamacare, and weaken labor unions. The recent Gallup poll reflects vast opposition to the man selected by the widely disliked Trump to erase gains for millions of Americans, and gains that millions of Americans fought for. All right, well, let's get on to our break, and we'll come back, and we will go through weather from around the world. And, of course, we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Homo sapiens has an outsized influence on the behavior of other animals. We have long hunted them, and more recently, we destroy habitats to build housing and coffee shops, and we build roads to drive from our houses to those coffee shops. But some of our influences are far more subtle.
My collaborators and I had noticed a striking pattern in some of our own data from far-flung places like Tanzania, Canada, Nepal, where animals that we were studying seemed to be more active at night when they were around people.
University of California, Berkeley wildlife ecologist Caitlin Gaynor. To see if animals really were changing their activity schedules, Gaynor and her team rounded up 141 studies of 62 kinds of mammals from across 6 continents. And they found that mammals near people across the globe have settled on a new strategy for survival. They take to the night when most of us are comfortably tucked into our beds counting sheep. The finding is in the journal Science. For example, an animal that would ordinarily prefer to spend half its active time during the daytime and half at night shifts to 2/3 of its active time under darkness. and our particular human behaviors do not seem to matter.
Something that surprised me in the study was just how consistent the shift towards nocturnality was across types of human disturbance. We had expected to see animals being a little bit more discerning and perhaps responding more strongly to activities like hunting that actually do pose a risk to the animal. But what we found was that, whether it is infrastructure development or hunting or even just hiking through wilderness areas, all of these human activities elicit a response in wildlife, suggesting that they're playing it safe around us.
In a way, this reaction is a good thing. The night shift allows animals to more safely coexist with us in shared spaces. But what's not yet clear is any long-term physiological changes animals may go through from adjusting their daily schedules, because many can't simply run away from us. Nor is it obvious what impacts these changes might have on broader ecological communities and on the food web.
Even if we think we're leaving no trace in the outdoors, our presence can have pretty lasting consequences.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Donald Trump and the White House are still trying to clean up the mess made by the president in Helsinki, but they keep muddying the swampy waters. Trump sat for an interview with Jeff Glor at CBS in which he claimed he was very strong on Russian election interference in his private one-on-one meeting with Putin.
You say you agree with U.S. intelligence that Russia meddled in the election in 2016.
Yeah, and I've said that before, Jeff. I have said that numerous times before, and I would say that that is true, yeah.
But you haven't condemned Putin specifically. Do you hold him personally responsible?
Well, I would, because he's in charge of the country, just like I consider myself to be responsible for things that happen in this country. So certainly, as the leader of a country, you would have to hold him responsible, yes.
What'd you say to him?
Very strong on the fact that we can't have meddling, we can't have any of that. Now, look, we're also living in a grown-up world. Will a strong statement, President Obama supposedly made a strong statement. Nobody heard it. What they did hear is the statement he made to Putin's very close friend, and that statement was not acceptable. Didn't get very much play, relatively speaking, but that statement was not acceptable. But I let him know we can't have this, we're not going to have it, and that's the way it's going to be.
Earlier in the day, a reporter asked Trump if Putin is still targeting our country with cyber attacks. Although the cameras clearly caught Trump answering no, the White House is claiming that he didn't. Anderson Cooper tries to explain the White House gaslighting.
He was asked by a reporter early today, and he answered no. In fact, he answered no twice, and he looked right at the reporter when he did, according to people in the room, and that answer was caught on video. As you might know, that contradicts what Dan Coats, his own director of national intelligence, said just 2 days ago and said before that just last Friday. Quoting Director Coats' statement now, "The warning lights are blinking red," is how he put it regarding the Russian threat. So unless the Russian cyber threat in the space of just a few days went from red alert to non-existent, the president doesn't seem to believe the intelligence community, his own hires who are now running it, despite what he just said today. So, of course, hours after the president said no, he didn't think Russia was still targeting us, the White House sent Sarah Sanders to the podium to tell us that what we heard was not at all what the president actually said. They've done this time and time again, of course. Either a spokesperson, a surrogate, or the president himself simply says or tries to suggest that you didn't really see or hear what you clearly saw or heard. Keeping them honest, though, this is not a case of different people having different recollections of what really happened. We know what really happened because it happened, all of it, on camera. So with that in mind, here's what the president actually said, followed by the attempted gaslighting.
Is Russia still targeting the U.S.? Is Russia still targeting the U.S., Mr. President? Press, let's go. Make your way out. No, you don't believe that to be the case? Let's go. We're finished here.
So despite the video that shows the president looking at Cecilia and answering no to this question about whether Russia is still targeting the U.S., and despite multiple people in the room understanding that the president was responding to that question, and despite the president having never before said the word no repeatedly to usher reporters out of the room, you're saying it's a reverse. You're saying the president said this is
the first thing that the president said after the question was asked was "Thank you very much," and then he said, "No, I'm not answering any more questions."
He didn't say, no, I'm not taking questions. No, comma, I'm not taking any more questions. That would make sense. He just said, no, thank you very much, looking at the reporter who just asked him a yes or no question. And he said it twice. looking at the reporter.
Late on Wednesday, the New York Times reported that the president, 2 weeks after his inauguration, read highly classified U.S. intelligence establishing that Putin himself personally ordered the plan of cyber attacks and disinformation to interfere with the election and to support Trump's bid for the White House. The White House on Wednesday also left open the possibility that it would allow Russian investigators to question U.S. citizens, including Michael McFaul, the U.S. ambassador to Russia under Obama, and Bill Browder, the man who spearheaded the Magnitsky Act, which is reviled by Putin. Michael McFaul was on Rachel Maddow's show Wednesday night.
Vladimir Putin has been after me for a long time, even when I was ambassador, harassing me in ways that no other U.S. ambassador there has ever experienced. I wrote a whole book about it to try to educate the American people about this man. He's done some outrageous things around the world, but even to our diplomats and even to me personally. What I was totally flabbergasted by was that the White House would not defend me. I'm an American citizen. I worked for the government for 5 years, and it would have been so easy to bat it back. And it's not just about me. I want to make sure people understand this. By not doing that, they are allowing moral equivalency between an indictment issued by Mr. Mueller last week against Russian intelligence officers and a handful of us, it wasn't just me, it was several American government officials, to request for this cockamamie crazy scheme. Nothing is true in what they said about it. And by the president allegedly just saying, okay, I'm going to look into it. In fact, he said at the press conference in Helsinki, I think it's a great idea. And then 48 hours later, you'd think they could come up with a policy and understand why this is so crazy and not in America's national interest. For some reason, they didn't get it right at the White House. I wish them well. I hope maybe tomorrow they'll get a better statement out.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is fully listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. James Madison's strong belief in religious freedom is evident in his drafting of the U.S. Bill of Rights. He had originally opposed adding a Bill of Rights to the Constitution because he doubted the effectiveness of mere paper barriers to tyranny, and because he did not see a need for such formal guarantees in a government limited to enumerated powers. He had promised his Baptist friends and others, however, that he would work for the addition of a Bill of Rights if the Constitution were adopted. He also became convinced that a formal Declaration of Rights would widen support for the new Constitution and would help the nation's courts protect the rights of minorities against majority encroachments. Almost single-handedly, Madison worked through the summer of 1789 to draft and secure agreement on the measure, overcoming the apathy and skepticism of congressional colleagues and working out an acceptable draft from among many proposals required all of Madison's political skills. Though many among the framers could claim to have had a hand in fathering the Constitution, the Bill of Rights was primarily Madison's offspring. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Thursday, July 19th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. The World Bank has announced that all of its projects will have to comply with a new set of rules aimed at improving working conditions and supporting trade unions. The bank is a development agency which provides more than $30 billion for capital projects such as infrastructure and social services. It works mainly in developing countries. The new set of rules, called a safeguard in World Bank parlance, will have a significant effect for employers and workers. To find out more about the new rules, I talked to Leo Bonnock. Mr. Bonnock is a research officer with the Office of the International Trade Union Confederation and Global Unions in Washington. I asked him to describe the bank and the new labor rules.
The World Bank is really kind of the foremost public multilateral institution dedicated to international development, and they currently describe their mission as ending poverty and promoting shared prosperity. In doing that, the World Bank provides over $30 billion in loans every year to fund development projects, giving them a very large footprint and a great deal of influence around the world. After many years of work by trade unions, the World Bank approved a labor safeguard, or a labor standard, in August 2016 that protects the rights of everyone who works on a project funded by the World Bank. The safeguards will go into effect later this year, meaning that the World Bank will join other development banks in taking proactive steps to protect project workers and respect labor rights more generally. First and foremost, this is necessary because the World Bank should ensure that the thousands of workers who execute their projects are treated fairly and provided with good jobs and decent, safe working conditions. If projects that are meant to improve lives and drive economic development are created by exploiting and abusing workers, then the mission of the World Bank is undermined from the start. Later this year in October, the annual meetings of the World Bank will be taking place in Bali, in Indonesia. In 2004, a trade union survey found that a bank-funded infrastructure project in Bali included children working in hazardous conditions, pay discrimination based on gender, failure to make Social Security payments, and 2 workers who were killed on the job. So as the World Bank prepares to walk on the international stage in Bali, this sort of thing will be reduced by the labor safeguard and give workers a tool to fight back against rights violations. And I think finally it's necessary because we as a trade union movement are working to push the bank to support a future that is defined by development and by decent work.
What sectors are most likely to be affected by these new rules, the safeguard as they're called?
The biggest and most visible area where the World Bank is involved is in infrastructure, both development and upgrades to existing assets. So these are things like roads, water projects, facilities to produce or transmit electricity. That's the largest source of their funding, both because these are a priority and because they're quite expensive. But the World Bank also provides loans to governments for a wide range of projects, for example, expanding healthcare services, expanding public transportation, reforming government agencies, or promoting economic diversification, just to name a few areas. And this new labor safeguard is going to apply to all workers employed on those projects, regardless of whether they work for the government borrower. Most of the borrowers from the World Bank are governments, or for a private contractor. In many cases, governments borrowing from the World Bank will contract private companies to carry out key activities, and those private companies will be the largest employer on a bank-funded project.
Will the new safeguard make a difference for workers employed in World Bank-funded projects?
Absolutely. This standard will make a difference for a large number of workers by requiring governments who lend money from the World Bank to take steps to protect project workers. The safeguard has the potential to set an example of how human and trade union rights can be fully respected in places where there are often violations. And in a time when trade unions are facing increasing repression, this could be an important tool for workers to organize unions, improve their working conditions, and ensure that economic growth includes quality jobs.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find an extended version of this report on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, folks. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, let's begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 65 degrees. Now, they say we're supposed to be nearly the same as yesterday. Well, if that was the case, we were about 103 yesterday. This forecast says we'll be in the mid-90s. We weren't in the mid-90s yesterday. I'm sorry. We were like in the low 100s. So, adjusting for the microclimate I am in, it looks like we'll be around 98 to 100 today. Oh, how nice. Winds are currently out of the west-southwest at about 1.5 miles per hour. They will be changing out of the northwest, coming out of the northwest in a couple of hours and increasing in velocity from 5 to 10 miles per hour, continuing throughout the day until this evening when they will shift out of the north-northwest, but at the same velocity of 5 to 10 miles per hour. Should have a low in the low to mid-60s, which would be nice tonight. We will not be able to open up any windows. It is filtered air. The smoke from the forest fires that are nearby, grass fires, I should be more correct in describing them, were so thick and so noxious that you really couldn't do much without taking extreme precautions. There were many air tankers flying overhead, ferrying fire retardant and water to put out these fires. And it's been smelling bad. And it's thick. Oh my gosh. So hopefully that'll change. But humidity currently is at 68%. I believe that should go down to the low 50s, upper 40s. Grass pollen remains high. I don't have any actual data on air quality, but it's so bad we have air advisory warning because of the forest fires. And, of course, that daytime UV index remains very high at 9, which is what happens here in Southern Oregon this time of year. And will for quite a while. Maybe fall will get some cloud cover and won't be so bad. High pressure dominates and it is holding right now at 30 inches. Visibility is only at 8 miles, and that's because of the massive amount of smoke in the air. And once again, that humidity is at 68%, should be going to the low 50s, which isn't that dry as I like it. Okay. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased and these people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 80 degrees and sunny with a heat advisory, so do take care. It's only going to get hotter. Paris is 87 and sunny, also with a heat advisory. And it looks like there's pretty much a heat advisory all over the continent. Well, I take that back. At least quite a bit of France currently is under a heat advisory. The tour is going on, and they're still in the Alps, so it should be a bit cooler up there. Though I've been in the Alps this time of year for the tour, as a matter of fact, and it can get pretty warm there when you're getting radiated. So everybody who's there, do take care. Rome is 87 and sunny, though they do not have a heat advisory. Kiev is 80 degrees and fair. Kabul is 86 and fair. Hong Kong, 78 degrees with light rain. Tokyo is 83 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy with a wind advisory on the bay and offshore for small craft. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and perfectly sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Starting off here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an article out of Think Progress by Luke Barnes. Google just received the largest fine ever given to the tech giant. European regulators yesterday slapped Google with a record-breaking $5 billion fine for violating antitrust laws and abusing the popularity of its Android mobile operating system. According to the European Commission, Google used a number of underhanded tactics with the Android, which denied rivals the chance to innovate and compete, and denied European consumers the benefits of direct competition in this important sphere. And that was in a statement by the European Commission. The tactics used included paying manufacturers and mobile operators large sums to exclusively pre-install Google search apps on their devices, as well as requiring manufacturers to pre-install Google Chrome and Google Search in order to access the Google Play stores. Whoa, I thought Gates did this. Also interesting. Who else might have done it? Maybe there was a proprietary company that started with A. Maybe. I think they did some of that too. Okay. Manufacturers were also strictly prohibited from selling devices which used unapproved versions of the Android operating system. Google has 90 days to comply with the ruling or risk facing additional fines, which total 5% of its daily revenue. The company said it plans to appeal the ruling. No wonder Trump says that the EU is our enemy. What a weirdo. Okay, rapid innovation, wide choice, and falling prices are classic hallmarks of robust competition, and Android has enabled them all, Google CEO Sundar Pichai said in a statement on Wednesday. Today's decision rejects the business model that supports Android, which has created more choice for everyone, not less. Well, the search engine giant is also in the process of appealing another European Union antitrust fine, totaling $2.7 billion from last year. In that case, investigators accuse the company of using its search engine to give advantages to its shopping comparison service. Facebook and Apple have also recently faced significant fines by the EU. The newest fine is yet another example of the EU cracking down on big tech, especially in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Oh, did you know that Cambridge Analytica was wholly funded and pretty much, well, not wholly funded because the Mercers were part of it, but they were working out of Russia also. That's another scandal that's going to be exploding in a few days. Okay, major tech companies have been at pains to comply with these edicts handed down by the EU. In May, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg told the European Parliament that he supported the rules and had instituted similar privacy controls for Facebook users worldwide. But a month beforehand, Facebook also moved responsibility for all of its 1.5 billion non-U.S. or Canadian accounts from the EU's jurisdiction in Ireland back to California, where the EU's rules have no effect.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees from the Agence France Presse brings us this last offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. A revolutionary gene editing technique hailed as the future of disease eradication and mooted for a Nobel Prize may be less precise and cause more cell damage than previously thought, researchers said on Monday. Lab experiments using mouse and human cells, can they tell the difference, revealed that the CRISPR-Cas9 technique frequently caused extensive gene mutations, a study team reported. This is the first systematic assessment of unexpected events resulting from CRISPR-Cas9 editing, said Alan Bradley of the Wellcome Sanger Institute in England, where the team conducts research. The research showed that the changes in the DNA have been seriously underestimated before now, said Bradley, who co-authored a study published in the journal Nature Biotechnology. The mutations have not been shown to be harmful nor benign. It is important that anyone thinking of using this technology for gene therapy proceeds with caution and looks very carefully to check for harmful effects. First unveiled about 6 years ago, CRISPR-Cas9 allows scientists to insert, remove, and correct a faulty sequence on a strand of DNA in a cell with pinpoint precision. It has raised hopes that one day disease-causing genes could be removed or altered before a baby is even born. In recent years, CRISPR-Cas9 has repeatedly been predicted to win the Nobel Chemistry Prize. CRISPR, which is CRISPR, stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, are part of the immune defense system in bacteria used to hone in on the exact spot on the genome where the cut should be made. Cas9 is a protein used as scissors to snip through the faulty gene, which is then replaced or fixed by the cell's own DNA repair mechanism. The technique's safety has not yet been proven, and it is not approved for use in human therapy. So far, researchers have used it to improve hearing in mice going deaf and to fix a disease-causing mutation in cloned early-stage human embryos. Wait, I thought we weren't supposed to be doing that. But the new finding raises safety implications. Okay, they found large genetic rearrangements such as DNA deletions and insertions in cells, which could lead to important genes being switched on or off and causing dangerous changes, like maybe a 3-year lifespan. The research also showed that standard tests do not pick up damage to DNA caused by CRISPR-Cas9. Experts not involved in the study said it was unclear how such large, unintended changes were not noticed before, but the results give no reason to panic or to lose faith in the methods when they are carried out by those who know what they are doing, said Robin Lovell Badge of the Francis Crick Institute, a biomedical research center in London. For Francesca Forzano, a consultant in clinical genetics and genomics with the Geese and St. Thomas NHS Foundation Trust, the work showed that CRISPR-Cas9 is much less safe than previously thought, and that safety monitoring techniques were not entirely adequate. More research is needed before any clinical application of the method is considered, she summed up. All right, well, we'll follow that story and see if they can improve it, because it still sounds like an interesting technique, though it's also playing God. But hey, that's what we do, because we're humans. We created God in our image now, didn't we? Let's get out of here. We got to stop we're stopping our broadcast period for the day here in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but Netroots Radio broadcasts on for breaking news all day, every day. And we will visit with you tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. That's what we do. And so stay tuned for that. But stay tuned, more importantly, because there's even more breaking news occurring right now as I speak. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.